let's talk about what the heck the French and the Germans know that we don't know, and why they seem to think that we're going to be possibly at war with Russia within a matter of a year or two. French hospitals, according to documents obtained by a French newspaper, have been ordered to make preparations for imminent war in Europe. Germany says it's on alert for a Russian military drill that could be used as an excuse to basically launch an invasion of European neighbours. Well, let's talk about this with Mason Gifford. He's a former British volunteer fighter in Ukraine and indeed elsewhere as well, and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Mesa.
Good afternoon.
This is all very worrying when you hear about these stories, or should we not read too much into it? And then actually, you know, we have to have preparations for war at all times, and that would include hospitals being able to prepare for a war or other emergencies, and that, of course, military drills would be a signal, you know, that perhaps we should be be on alert, or is there something to worry about here?
There is genuinely something to worry about. At the end of the day, Vladimir Putin is a dictator. He's someone that doesn't consider there to be a limit to Russia's borders. He said in the past that wherever a Russian soldier places his boot belongs to Russia. He's even described the fall of the USSR as one of the greatest tragedies that's ever sort of befallen the world. So this is a man who has already invaded Ukraine. He aspires to take other countries in Europe, or other parts of Europe, for example, Transnistria in Moldova, the Baltic countries. For us personally, it would be devastating if there was an invasion of the Svalbard Islands. So at the end of the day, we must be prepared. We've underinvested in the military for a very long time. And the new Russian tactic of seizing ground and then hiding behind their bloated military forces and their nuclear weapons is something that could genuinely erode Europe's borders.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder about our ability to actually see the genuine threats that face us, given that an awful lot of the so-called experts, even up to, you know, mid-February in 2022, were saying, of course, Russia isn't going to invade Ukraine. Putin said he wouldn't, apart from the fact he basically had said he would, and he'd amassed 120,000 troops on the border and a whole bunch of tanks. I remember thinking it was pretty much a sure thing that he was going to invade. Oh, and what a surprise he did. I mean, first of all, you can't take anything he says for granted. He has talked today about how, of course, he's not going to invade other countries, but he's done it repeatedly. And he's done it very cleverly, as we saw with Crimea in 2014, the little green men. No Russian insignia on their uniforms, but they were basically, Russian military going in. And that's the big fear in countries like the Baltic states, that's what's going to happen. They're surrounded by Russian territory. And the fear in Poland. Do you think actually the countries that have not only have closer, real borders, actual land borders with Russia, but also have experienced life under Russian rule, under Soviet rule, they perhaps get it rather better than our lot do here?
Absolutely, because the threat for them is right on their doorstep. You've seen Poland invest a vast amount of money in their military over the last couple of years. They've grown their tank force to well over 1,000 modern battle tanks. Meanwhile, Britain, we're going to buy about 150 or so when we upgrade to the Challenger 3.
Yeah, that'll solve it then. I mean, even Poland, I believe, Poland's even they reinforced their border, haven't they? It's now got a few miles now of the barbed wire and the blocks and basically reinforcing their ability to actually prevent a land invasion. They are taking it seriously.
An iron curtain has descended over Europe again. Basically, from all through Poland, all through the Baltic countries, they're investing billions of pounds in defending their borders. As I said before, Russia has a long-standing tactic of deception, of saying one thing and doing another. Yeah. And it is ingrained within their military ideology. And they did it in Ukraine, and they're very likely to do it in other parts of Europe as well. And the old tactic of the Baltic countries retreating, ceding ground for time so that Europeans can step in and sort of save the day is now no longer an option, because Europe is not in the condition it once was.
And that's interesting, because I've heard lots of people say, look, Putin's not going to risk war with Europe, i.e. with NATO countries under those treaty obligations under NATO, but also they're already bogged down in Ukraine. They can't possibly have the forces. They're already stretched beyond anything to actually then take on other countries. What would you say to those claims?
Well, Russia is increasingly aligning itself with China. There is a new axis of evil on this planet.
And we're seeing that in this summit right now, playing out right now.
Absolutely. The world has become a hell of a lot more unstable than it once was. We have entered a new phase of the sort of post-World War world of ideals, of democracy, free speech, and all the rest of it. We are back to the 1920s and before. This is the age of empires again, essentially. Yeah. And this is something that even Donald Trump has pushed, which is a shame, because that is part of the consideration. Will Trump come to the defense of Europe?
But there's no actual duty to militarily defend our allies. I would absolutely question the likelihood that many European countries, let alone America, would actually go to military defence of any of our allies, particularly the Baltics. I think there'd be a, oh, well. I mean, I think we're in 1930s territory of sort of, well, maybe he'll be placated by having this country or that. But the reality is there is that real threat. So in terms of how we should be preparing, look, you're someone, you fought against ISIS, you fought against Russian forces in Ukraine. In terms of the reality of war, look, we know we're supposedly beefing up our percentage of our GDP spending on war, but let's face it, a lot of that is like veterans' pensions. Well, it's worthwhile, but it ain't going to help our war effort. Apparently, a bunch of it is going to be money that's going to be spent on paying the Mauritius to rent back the Chagos Islands that we already own. And we're talking about a tiny increase over a number of years to come in the future when the threat is the here and now. What would you do if you were in charge of making those decisions? What would you be spending and what would you be buying and who would you be recruiting and in what numbers?
Well, if the first thing I've been devastated by is the split between Europe and America, I do think that closer unity between sort of Western civilization, amongst Western civilization, is so vital when we come to countering the rise of countries like China. Yet at the same time, we should be spending more on defense. We should be spending more money on the ability to grow mass. I'm not necessarily saying that we should have a bloated army today, but the ability to have a solid reserve of equipment that then when there is a surge of sort of patriotic fervor, if there were to be a major large-scale war, it doesn't have to be patriotic fervor, it could be actually just the fact that we'd be recruiting more. Just the ability to train them, the ability to house them, the ability to actually equip them and then deploy them. We've got to consider the military today, which is 74,000 or whatever it is at the moment, is simply the first wave of a major conflict. The ability to raise another 50,000, 60,000, 100,000 is something that we should be considering and investing in.
And when you look at countries like Finland, they've got like 250,000 people in their reserves.
Absolutely, and they've got plans to grow it to 1 million. By the way, their population is something like 5 million people in the entire country, yet they have plans to grow their reserve to 1 million people in the event of war. So it's just the ability in the UK to have the equipment and the resources and the infrastructure available that if there was a large-scale war, that we would actually be able to defend ourselves and actually be a partner.
Which right now we can't, and when we do need to, it's going to cost us a heck of a lot more.
Absolutely. And as you said before, the Chagos Islands, we absolutely should not be falling into that trap.
Absolutely, 100% on that. Mesa, we'll have to leave it there. Mesa Gifford, former British volunteer fighter in Ukraine. He's been on the actual ground, literally in the trenches. Tom Slater, I mean, he speaks an awful lot of sense in this. How worried are you about this? And especially we've got this meeting going on in the West, in the East right now. We've got Xi Jinping hosting the likes of the North Korean leader, Russian leader Vladimir Putin, the Indian leader Modi, who's increasingly supposed to be one of us, democratic leader, increasingly moving to the East.
Well, it's one of those things where we knew that we were heading towards this more multipolar world. That was kind of an inevitability. There's also the kind of question about what it is that China in particular want. They, in some respects, are quite a kind of cautious sort of status quo power. You could get the sense that they were as, if not morally outraged and certainly irritated by what Russia did in Ukraine because of the fact that it kind of scrambles the dial and whatever. But I think the takeaway is, regardless of what happens next, the West in particular, but probably the world in general, has realised that this kind of like supposed holiday from history that we've been on is over. And we need to start looking at geopolitics afresh. We cannot just assume that everything's going to be fine because war is something that happened in the past. And there are big questions to be had. I'm sure everyone wants to do that in such a way that averts any kind of major conflict and what have you. But at the same time, those questions need to be addressed.
You can avert a conflict by preparing for a conflict. Speak softly, but carry a big stick. We ain't got the stick. stick. That's right. We've
Barely
got
got a twig
idiots
at the
like
moment.
David Lammy.
Got a twiglet. I
Yeah,
think,
we've
as
got
far as I can tell.
exactly. Coming up, on that happy note, happy Tuesday, day 2 of phase 2. Again, when we talk about the immigration, we talk about the economy and all the things, this is a government that is utterly, utterly incapable of taking on and dealing with some of these issues.